What's up, everybody? The substitution cipher is a type of encryption in which each letter or symbol of your plaintext is replaced by another letter or symbol. Examples of substitution ciphers are things like the Caesar cipher or the polyalphabetic cipher, at bash, things like that. Substitution cipher is what people who are just beginning to get into ciphers generally have the easiest time with. The substitution cipher has been used for years, hundreds of years. In fact, in 1657, a man named Ben Ezra Asaph wrote an entire book called The Subtlety of Witches. And he wrote it in cipher form. And it turns out he just used a simple substitution cipher to write it. But for years, this whole book went undecrypted. We had no idea what this book said until a guy named Tony Gaffney came up with a key. And then a couple of friends of mine took that key and decrypted the book. They wanted to know what this book was about. They wanted to know about the subtlety of witches.
All right, so let's talk about witches.
Yes,
You guys want
let's
to
roll.
talk about witches? They're very subtle.
Sometimes more subtle than you expect.
So we have Brett with us, but we also have two guests. We have Kat, and I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. Rion. Is that close?
Yeah.
Rion. And Kat and Rion have done something kind of amazing. They've taken a book. Well, actually, I'll just let you guys tell the story. What? First off, how did you guys meet
well,
originally?
a few years ago, I was kind of digging into any information I could find about the Voynich manuscript. And, I have no delusions of being the one who's going to crack it, but I just find the whole topic fascinating. So I was kind of looking around for some blog posts and, any information I could find about that. And I ran across a blog run by Nick Pelling called Voynich Mysteries, I think. And he had a list of cipher manuscripts, just all known cipher manuscripts. And he talked a little bit about this one that was called The Subtlety of Witches, and that there wasn't much information about it out there other than it was in the British Library. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting title, and nobody knows anything about this. Nobody knows what it says. That seemed kind of weird because it sounds interesting. I couldn't find a lot of information about it, so I let's see. I found the blog of a guy named Klaus Schmidt, a German guy, codebreaker, and he had also written a little bit about cipher manuscripts on his blog, and I emailed him saying, do you know anything about this? And he said, well, actually, I went to the British Library a few years ago, and I took some pictures of the pages. I can send them to you if you want to take a look. They haven't really been decrypted. And I said, yes, absolutely. And I had a look, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And so I ended up chatting with a guy, a professor by the name of Frederick Porchedu, who had gotten in contact with a codebreaker named Tony Gaffney, and Tony had sent him the key. He was actually one who broke the cipher. And so sort of through the grapevine, I ended up with a copy of Tony's key. And so I set out to start decrypting it. I got through a couple of pages, and I quickly realized this is in Latin, and I don't speak Latin. And so then I went to Reddit, and I made a post saying, can anyone help with this, basically? And that's how I met Rian, who, not only speaks Dutch, obviously, which some of the manuscript is in, but she also has familiarity with Latin, and we started chatting. And this was back in 2019, I believe. She had a plan to go to London to check it out herself, but then COVID happened and all our plans kind of got waylaid. So we just kind of kept talking about it and decrypting. And I made a subreddit to discuss it. And so then in 2021, we went to London together to meet up and go to the British Library and check it out firsthand and take good pictures of it and, just figure out everything we could from being there with it physically. And then we wrote our paper.
What was that the first time you guys met in person?
Yeah, we haven't even video chatted before. We just
Cool.
texted and have bet on Reddit. And
I probably should have asked this before, but just so people watching know who the two people we're talking to are. Brett and I have several heroes in the puzzle world, and one of them is Kat. All of the puzzles that we've worked on, Kat's been sort of the lead for those puzzles. She's figured out the most. She's led communities to solutions. So she's very, very good at puzzles and ciphers and things like that. But Rion, I don't know much about your history when it comes to ciphers. Or were you always interested? Is this your first foray?
I have dabbled in some ciphers before. I did a double bachelor in AI and in clinical psychology. So I sideways got involved with solving puzzles that way.
Cool.
And I do speak, indeed, multiple languages. I don't speak Latin, but I can read it, at least. And, yeah, I have a fascination for history. So when I saw Kat's post about the manuscript, I was like, okay, yeah, I think we can solve this. I do at least speak the two languages that this thing is in.
Cool.
Let's go for it.
And so you're more of a, are you more into languages than ciphers, or kind of?
I'm an academic who does speak multiple languages, as most kids educated in the system I went through do. We have to do 4, and then you have electives, and I took 2 more of those, including Latin.
Latin is pretty cool, and it's a good base for everything, I feel.
It's kind of boring, actually, because it is very structured.
Yes.
But at least you know what you get.
Yes. Yes, exactly. I like Latin because, I do speak Spanish, but I feel like if you peel back a layer and look at what a lot of modern day languages are based in, it just there's a formula that Latin provides for it, I feel. So it helps doing things like ciphers and decoding things and puzzles a little bit easier to have a little bit of knowledge in it, at least.
Yeah, I took Latin in high school, and this sounds really impressive, but it's not. I went to a type of medical school, and that's the only time Latin's ever helped me, because if you understand basics of Latin, you can look at medical terminology and know exactly what it is.
It's easy,
Yeah. So anyway, what subreddit was this posted on? Just so, was it Unresolved Mysteries or
Unresolved Mysteries? Yeah, yeah, a good old Unresolved
That's where
Mysteries.
all the cool puzzles go.
So yeah, when we had Tony's key, we had a good place to start, and we started decrypting and decoding and transcribing what was in the manuscript. And a couple of pages in, we were like, okay, this looks suspiciously like a dictionary. And now that we've done all 400 pages, it has not changed. It is a dictionary.
You guys did all 400 pages?
Yes,
oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. How long did that take?
About a year?
Yeah, a year, maybe a year and a half.
Jeez, it's incredible. If people listening want to see it, where can they see it if they're not on Reddit?
We're gonna quickly publish the complete text.
Cool.
But we were gonna do it before we had this conversation. So sometime soon we will publish the full text and make it also available on the subreddit. But we're gonna publish it soon. We're still working through the last few mistakes that are ours, because there's mistakes in the print, there's mistakes in the transcription and the encryption, and we made mistakes too. So we're filtering ours out and make an annotated and a raw version of the text.
After we finish the big project of actually decrypting the text, then we've been working on the even bigger project of going through and comparing all the decrypted text to the dictionary that we believe it was sourced from, and figuring out what wasn't copied, what the original phrases were, more than likely. So that's kind of been the bigger project after the big project.
Yeah, and I have something to add to that too, because the deviations from the source text are minimal. There are tiny phrases, and there's not that many of them that are slightly different. And there's one inserted bit that is by Lorenza Vallo, and that is about what we would call in English neither nor, the grammatical construction of that, nedum et non solum, and that is inserted into the text and marked, and that's the only real deviation that we found so far.
Well, if I remember correctly, in the paper, there were also a couple of phrases that were written by the author that weren't in the dictionary. It was just completely original thoughts.
One or two. He or she says at some point, ego Petrus, so I, Peter, read somewhere that, and then goes right back to the source dictionary.
But we're not sure if, when he says I, Peter, we're not sure if he's referring to himself or if it's quoting something else, or
if he's referring to the Peter from the Bible, or what is going on.
All right.
We don't know yet.
And the book was stamped, so it was titled The Subtlety of Witches, but I guess we're coming to find out that title was added later, because it was also dated 1657, but you found out it likely was written well before that, correct?
Oh, absolutely. That is a big fat lie. Yeah. We kind of figured from the looks of it alone, the handwriting style mainly, that it was 16th and not 17th century. And when we were in London, we took photos with a light sheet to figure out if we can find the watermark. And we did. We stitched it together, get that. And we quickly figured out it was made in France, in Troyes, in the 1540s to 1572.
Wow.
And that's just because that's when that specific paper was available. And
correct. And our papermaker was probably caught up in St. Bartholomew's night and was probably murdered in a raid on his house in 1572. And the paperwork does not show up after that.
So was this, you said the paper was made in France. Does that sort of limit the area this book was written in to France, or was there a trade?
Not really.
Was this paper common?
This is a hard question that you're asking, because we're in the middle of the Reformation when this paper was made. And there was Catholic and Protestant paper makers and traders. The one who made our paper is a Protestant. He was a Huguenot and one of their leaders. So we know quite a bit about him, because we've read about 8 books in medieval French from a contemporary about his religion and the goings-on in Troyes around that time. I've been to his house. I have a picture of it. I'll send it to you later. So paper made in France was traded mainly to Antwerp and to Amsterdam, maybe to Hamburg, but it was traded from there everywhere else. So what we can tell from this is that it's Western Europe somewhere. The larger clue is in the Middle Dutch. That wasn't spoken and still isn't in a large area. It's just Netherlands and Belgium, pretty much.
Right. I believe from the paper there was like a small time period when that was commonly spoken, and that's sort of kind of what helps you date and place this book in a geographic area.
The paper and the language did the heavy lifting. Yes.
In the paper, you give a sort of brief overview of during the Reformation, the problems between the Protestants and the Catholics, and I didn't. You said that it's possible that the dictionary was encoded because of the problems with Protestants and Catholics. Could you expand on that? I just didn't understand.
Yeah, it's can I expand on it? I'll try. There is animosity between the two, and there are excommunications happening, which means you also can't trade anymore. if you get excommunicated by the Pope, you can't trade with other Catholics because they will then also be excommunicated and they're not willing to lose their livelihoods usually. So it's not as such an issue with the Reformation itself because it's a dictionary and it was widely available. At that time, it was the main one. It went so far even that the name of the author, Calipino, became the brand name for dictionaries during at least 150 years. So a Calipino is a dictionary. So that wasn't particularly controversial as such, but people were moving. People had to flee for the Inquisition, for armies, whatever was going on. There was the French had an internal war, and we had the 80 Years' War against the Spanish. So there was a lot of movement of troops also going on, and a lot of animosity and battles, and all sorts of nastiness. So people would encrypt things, not necessarily a dictionary, but they would encrypt their communications, and they would hastily leave sometimes. So that's why probably our dictionary is not complete. It stops halfway the letter D.
Oh,
Just
so
I have to find what I have and go.
wow. Wait, it's not even the whole thing?
No,
Oh
no, not even close.
Okay, I'm going to recap so I understand. Massive.
Yeah, they're huge.
no. Yeah,
Massive.
it's like this. Yeah.
Jeez. Okay, so you guys found a book, collaborated on it. It was somebody titled it "The Subtlety of Witches," which it's not. It's actually an
Absolutely not.
ancient dictionary. Somebody probably titled it that to give it to like increase its value or make it seem cool. Way later, like 100
Yes.
plus years
In the
later.
19th century.
Right. Okay, so somebody names it that.
Somewhere in 1835, the title was added.
And somebody
yeah.
painstakingly took a Calipino dictionary and enciphered it with symbols nonetheless. So by hand, because there's no typewriters and stuff like that back then, right? So, and only got to D. Holy crap. And it's monstrous. Okay, and then so it's sitting around for centuries then. And it ends up
Yes.
in you said Greenwich? Okay, so it ends up in,
British Library.
okay, a British library. All right.
The British Library.
Where it sits basically nobody knows what it is. Wow, this is probably about witches, but we don't know what all these symbols are, right? So then you guys get interested in it, and Tony Gaffney somehow got his hands on like pictures of the ciphers, right? Or did he go see it in person?
I have no idea. He is London based and it's free.
Yeah, that's true.
So
he probably went to go see it in person, but
you guys meet for the first time. You guys go to the library. You guys are allowed access to this book somehow. How did you convince them to let you look at it?
It was not hard, actually. That was the only part that wasn't hard. I just emailed the British Library, but hey, we want to see this book. And it wasn't restricted because nobody knew what the bleep it was.
Do they let you touch it?
Yes.
No way.
Yep.
We have pictures of that too, yeah.
Like you can turn the pages and stuff?
Yes.
Oh,
That
yes.
is
Yes.
so Indiana Jones and like national treasure. And the reason I'm fascinated is because it's got politics and it's got the Huguenots and it's got economics and trade and ciphers and religious and other war. I mean, like, this is amazing. It's
fraud,
an amazing story. And so I
potentially.
wanted to recap because it's cool.
Oh yeah, fraud.
And fraud.
Don't forget the fraud.
Yes. And murder. That dude got murdered.
Yeah, the
Who got
history
that?
of this book itself is more interesting. I think he was talking about the paper maker.
Oh yeah, the paper.
The
maker.
history
yeah.
of this book, the history of this book itself is more interesting than the book.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and
yeah,
I do want to add something about how we know it was done in 1835.
Sure.
Because we know exactly when it was sold. It was sold in February of 1836 by Thomas Rodd, who was a well-known bookseller, to the British Library, to Frederick Matt, who was assistant keeper and later keeper of manuscripts.
wow.
We have records of that. So that is something we know. And we know he was in Belgium in October in 1835. And in his catalog from 1834, there is no Subtlety of Witches. We looked through all the pages of his whole inventory for 1834. It's not in there. So he bought it somewhere in 1835 on the mainland and sold it in February of 1836.
And he likely added that title.
Or the Belgian seller. I
Well,
am not willing to throw him under the bus yet, because somebody wanted to increase the value, but it could also be in Belgium.
Right. Is there any other book in his catalog of things he purchased that year that could be just like an unnamed book?
You're
No.
asking another difficult question, because he was involved in a case of fraud with his Shakespeare folio. But what happened at that point was he had it, he sold it, he went to the British Library, and he dropped dead within 2 hours. So he probably didn't feel all that well at that point in time when he sold that specific folio.
Wow.
I'm not willing to accuse him of fraud in that specific case, but there is one other situation where there was known fraud with a book involving this man.
So the way that manuscripts were categorized was by size, and this is the other reason that we don't, if it didn't have a title but it was in his catalog somewhere, we would have been able to find it because they're organized by size. And this particular book is the size is it's called duodecimo, which basically means one sheet of folio cut into 12. So it's very small. It's like about that big. And it was uncommon for manuscripts to be that small from what I've seen looking through the catalogs. So we've looked at all his duodecimos that he was selling, and there's really nothing that could have been it. There's no unknown cipher manuscript or anything like that.
So the key for this is not very complicated. It's got a couple of complicated sections, like the letter S with three characters that might say three. One's kind of similar.
Yeah, but they're not actually coded. That's just how an S looked in medieval and Renaissance handwriting.
So how long between the time Tony Gaffney created the key? How much time was there between that and you guys decoding this book? I'm curious why nobody else just took a shot at taking the key and decoding.
Right.
I guess they didn't care. We've been alone in this corner forever.
We care.
I care.
I would have done it had I known about this. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it occurred to me too. It just, why nobody had ever taken a shot at this. It just wasn't ever widely, I think Nick and Klaus were really the first people to post about it anywhere. And they only, had a couple people engaging on their blog posts specifically about this manuscript. So I emailed every one of them. I emailed Klaus, I emailed Nick, I emailed everyone in the comments who mentioned it, which wasn't that many people, thinking someone's got to know something about this thing. But I quickly realized, we were going to have to do this ourselves. The information just wasn't out there.
Yeah, so, and we posted what we had on the Reddit, so if anybody would have wanted to beat us to it, they could have.
Well, I'm glad they didn't.
Totally. That's for you guys to do. And what an adventure you went on.
Yeah, and it was done so meticulously. Like there are questions when it comes to this book, but the research has been so meticulous, and we know so much about this because you guys sort of, instead of just being a fly-by-night, okay, I got the key, I'm going to decrypt this book, you guys put in the time and the effort. You published a paper about it, for God's sake.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we presented it. But yeah, no, I do have my academic standards, and I did want to do it right. If we were going to do it, it had to be done right. It had to be meticulous, and we had to look at every angle, and we had to consider all the phrases, the religious phrases. Kat can tell you about the ending of the book in a second. And we had to consider every single avenue that we had because we had very little information available.
See, when I solve something, I just immediately throw it back right into Reddit so that everybody knows that I was the first one to solve it. That Reddit timestamp is important to me. Paper schmaper for me. Okay, so what's going on with the end of the book?
So as Rion mentioned, the author gets about halfway through D and then it just stops. And there's actually, I think, 18 blank pages at the end. Like, it literally just stops. You know, it's not like the author ran out of paper and was like, well, this is good enough. But it ends with a phrase that's not from a dictionary, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the Latin, but the translation is, I attest that Christ was born of the Virgin Mary. That's all. And so, you know, we tried to figure out, does this phrase come from something? We couldn't find any match for this phrase in Latin anywhere. As far as we can tell, like, this is the only example that exact phrase was used. We did find there's a Christmas carol called Gaudete that's from the mid to late 1500s, so that has a similar phrase in the chorus about, like, Christ was born of the Virgin Mary today or whatever. So it's like, well, what does that mean? Why did the author choose to end it with that, you know? And honestly, we have a lot of theories, but it's hard to really say.
I think what we can say is that the author was a Protestant, because there is a divergence in the Reformation about the role of Mary. Because to the Catholics, she is a holy person, and to the Protestants, she is Christ's mother. And she's a virgin, and she's revered, but she's not holy anymore. So the missing tiny word of holy here is an indication that we're looking at someone with Protestant inclinations. Yeah. And I'm willing to bet that that is the conclusion here because of the divergence in religion about Mary and her position in the dogma and the liturgy.
Yeah, that would make sense. Most Catholic writing that I've ever seen would be modern, but they refer to Mary as the Holy Mother.
Holy, yeah.
Yeah.
And I read the whole book in Dutch about the Catholic perspective on the Reformation and the position of Mary from the 19th century. And it was not fun to read because the person writing it is very dramatic and very angry about the situation. But I did find the answer that I was looking for, that this is a Protestant.
So I have a fun question. So my favorite quote from the paper, and I think it's basically everybody's quote from the paper, is this book is not very subtle and contains very few witches.
Yeah, we left that in on purpose.
When does it mention witches?
It does occasionally when the source dictionary does too. There is one quote from Cicero about evil women that does get translated as witches sometimes, and sometimes it will be translated a little bit differently, but translating is making choices. So
right.
There's a couple of quotes from the source dictionary that do say something about magic or evil spirits or evil women. Occasionally. It's like 3 instances.
So what you're saying, it just subtly mentions
right.
witches.
So
it does.
The
Yes.
fraudulent
Yes.
title is actually accurate, is what you're saying.
It's true. Find the witches.
There's a lot of other subtle references in there too.
We can have a discussion about the patriarchy in medieval society because the author of the source dictionary is a monk.
I see.
So they have some opinions about women, and the Romans did too. Not necessarily good ones.
You were saying before that there was there's an idea behind the reason of this book that has to do with anti-Semitism. Is that something you want to get into? Because it's just such an odd, other than shock value for selling the book, it's just such an odd title.
So what it was, just to explain, is that the title that was written in the front of the books, the Subtlety of Witches, also had an author, was given as Ben Ezra Asef. And we looked extensively for anyone with this name in history, or even any rearranged, version of the name. Maybe Asef was the first name, Asef Ben Ezra. We looked for that. We found zero evidence that there was ever a person with this name, much less an author. There would have been some mention of this person somewhere else. Yeah, he doesn't exist. So someone picked that name for a reason.
No.
So the name is fake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The name is fake.
Everything about this book is fake.
Wow.
Every bit about the title is fake.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? We've got this book deciphered. We know a lot about its history. We've written a paper. We've published the paper. We've given a presentation on it. Where does the research go from here? What questions do you still have unanswered?
We want to figure out who did it. We want to write that paper, and where we should start probably is by publishing the full text and doing a little bit more digging into the deviations and a little bit more digging into the who and the what and the where of the 80 Years' War in the printing industry and the dictionary industry. And then hopefully in a couple of months, we can start a new paper, but we can publish the full text before that.
Cool. Are you guys getting bored of it, though?
Sometimes I do think that my Latin has improved a lot and that I don't need to do it anymore, but no, we need to publish this thing.
It's got to happen. You have to take it the final mile.
We have to do this. I mean, what is the use of stopping now? We put 3 years, nearly 4, into this thing. We need to get to the who and the why.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because I don't know if you know about this thing.
Oh God.
I can't really see what that is, unfortunately.
This is The Secret by Byron Price, and it's basically the reason that George and I met to begin with in person after meeting on Reddit. And it's a puzzle book that was written in 1982. It's got pictures and poems, and you're supposed to put them together to find locations of treasures all hidden around the United States. Anyway, long story short, I'm over it. I don't ever want to talk about it again. I can't even believe I brought it up here. But, after obsessing over this thing every day, every moment of every day for 5 years, I'm done. I'm never going to solve it.
What happened?
You know what happened? As with anything, things get political and weird. We created this decent sized community, we took it from, just a small group of niche people that were into it. And it grew into this 12,000, 13,000 people on our Facebook page. And then all these different, it got political, weird. People eventually ruin everything. And I won't get into the details of what specifically happened, but me and George decided to put it down, and I hope that you guys don't do that. And
we won't.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
But we're not 12,000 people. It's
That's
two of
true.
us and a couple of loosely associated other people.
There's 4 of us now. Don't exclude.
Yeah.
That 5. We can't skip over Eric here. Eric is a little bit shy for spotlight, but he is a brilliant Latinist, a brilliant linguist, and he helped us identify the paste down in the cover in that.
Wow.
And he didn't want to be a co-author, but I did, of course, thank him in the acknowledgement.
Wow. He didn't even want any part of the fanfare, huh?
Yeah.
I asked and I asked again. No, the answer was no.
And then apparently there's no way of getting in touch with Tony to find out what I know. It's just a simple substitution cipher. So
I can try. I have his email
Cool.
address, and he did email me back exactly once, because we asked if we could publish our modified key that was based on his key in our paper, and he said, yeah, that's cool. I mean, this probably took him like an afternoon. This guy is a genius code breaker. He's broken all kinds of way more complicated ciphers than this. And there were certain clues in the text as to what language the source was, because every now and then there's this word quad. It's a common word in Latin, and the author doesn't always encrypt it. So sometimes you'll just see the word quad as a clear text. So if you knew the quad was a Latin word, then you would know, well, this text is probably in Latin.
Yeah, there's quad is the most pronounced, but there's occasionally the author forgets to encrypt something, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, now I can read it.
People that can do that astound me. People that can create a key and decode something that's not in a language that they speak. I mean, I don't know if you speak German, but it's not in a language.
I do.
I guess what I mean is it's not in a language that like you're decrypting something in English. Like if you don't know how the words come together, like how do you make the key? It's just so crazy.
There's quite a lot of AI on that matter nowadays, and basically it gives you analysis of the characters that you happen to have, and the combinations of those will tell you which language it most likely is.
So because it's like a frequency analysis, but the frequencies are different in different languages.
Correct.
So it'll tell you it's more likely. Okay, I got you. I got you.
Yeah. Nah, so I think that is what Tony did. He looked through the pages.
Damn.
Like, okay, this is Latin, and then he knew it was a substitution cipher quickly, because what you do see is the complexity of ciphers taking a massive nosedive after the 15th century. 15th century is very complex, very elaborate, very mathematical. 16th century, bleh.
Really?
Probably also because of the unrest of the Reformation, of everything happening in every country all at once. Because we're also talking Henry VIII, we're also talking France in turmoil, Spanish Inquisition, the mess that was left by Pope Borgia. We're talking about all sorts of things happening all at once. We're talking about Suleiman the Magnificent and the Ottoman Empire. Everything happened very, very much. So I think that is why the scholarly side of things became less complex very quickly in that time.
People were busy scrambling and running from
and they were fighting a lot.
Fighting.
Burning books, torturing people, having wars. Yeah.
You just get busy with that stuff. I get it.
If you're uneducated or unfamiliar with ciphers and you need to encipher a text, the easiest way to do it is a simple substitution.
But if you're uneducated, you do not use Latin.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That this is a very elite group of people we're talking about who could have done this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And education was not a given.
I didn't mean educated like that. I just meant if you're not familiar with ciphers, if you don't use them in your everyday life, but if you're not a common user and you have to encipher something, or you want to encipher something, the easiest way to go about doing that is a simple substitution. It requires no knowledge of ciphers before. So with all of these problems, all of a sudden people who wouldn't normally encipher something find themselves needing to. And that's just the easiest way for them to do it. I'll create a key of symbols, I'll encipher everything with the key, and boom, I'm done.
Yeah, that makes sense, but do keep in mind this is a very small group of people in all of this happening that is able to even do this. Because literacy was not
uncommon.
Granted. Yeah. And especially education in Latin, education in another language, the person might not have even been a native speaker of Middle Dutch, might have been German, might have been something else, might have been French. They probably also spoke French because there's one or two mistakes that are in French all of a sudden. So it's a small world in the world that we're talking about.
Wow. Do you think they stopped because they died, or did they just get bored?
I can't tell you who we suspect. No, they probably not, but they might have had to leave
Okay.
because of what was happening.
See what I'm doing here? See what I did there?
And you're not getting me.
Damn it. You're too smart for me.
I think we're good on our questions. Is there anything that you guys feel we missed or glossed over that's important that you want to get out or that you want to talk about?
So there is one sort of weird thing that we haven't been able to figure it out is there's a title page with an encrypted phrase that doesn't seem to make any sense. Like it includes a character that's not found anywhere else in the text, and the letters that we do know, it doesn't like really form words.
Cool.
At least nothing that we can recognize. And so that's, I feel like if we could just figure out what that one phrase means, we would potentially have a pretty good clue, but it's just kind of a jumble of letters.
In the first page, and the subtitle on the second page were hard to read. And the first page does not make any sense at all, even though I suspect that the 72 is not encrypted, but is a year.
Right.
I'm not certain on this, so I'm not going to say that it is, but I'm guessing it is 1572.
It doesn't, that's the one that stuck out at me because it doesn't super appear to be the same hand. Is it possible that was sort of gibberish that was added by the person that titled the book?
And we had wondered if because it has certain similarities with the title that's on the next page 2A, which we have mostly decrypted, but it's not an exact match, and some parts of it aren't really similar at all. But yes, the hand does appear different, but that could have just been because it was written in a hurry. The characters are not as well formed. It's hard to say, but yeah, for now, it's just gibberish, and we're hoping to figure that out maybe in the future.
Yeah, and we need to find the religious significance of Christ is born of the Virgin Mary, I attest. So the last phrase in the manuscript.
Those are the couple of things you're working on that you're trying to finalize, right?
And the stamp is something we're still wondering about, because if we look at the fashion history, the stamp predates at least the paper by a couple of decades because of the high forehead that was common until 1510, 1520. So the 15th century, half the 15th century to the beginning of the 16th, but definitely not in the time frame our paper was made. So the stamp is older than the paper. So we want to know, who is that? Where does it come from?
That's going to be so difficult for you because I've seen people track down stamps before, but they were always sort of special, different or intricate or something. Yours is so basic.
Yeah.
It looks like, I mean, you posted it next to in your paper, you posted it next to a painting, and it could be the exact copy of that painting. And that painting, there's so many different variations of that painting. It's just a common side view of a woman. Like, how do you track that?
Yeah, it's going to be a hard one.
Yeah.
I hope that by traipsing around Europe a little bit, I might run into it again at some point in a museum or in a collection. But if anybody would have a lead, that would be fantastic.
And the other thing that we've been working on, without giving away too much of our current research, is we've been working on handwriting analysis. comparing the unencrypted letters in the text to a possible suspect to see how similar that handwriting might have been. And, you know, it's hard because handwriting isn't always an exact science, and it can be tough to conclusively prove, you know, this person was the author based on handwriting. But again, we're just kind of building up that evidence to hopefully make a case.
Yeah, and
You know,
it looks promising. Let's end it there.
Cool.
So I'm good. Brett, are you good?
I'm good. I'm blown
Kat,
away.
Rion,
And
you guys good?
Yep.
I feel like we have not impressed Rio. So it's just like this is
that wasn't our job today.
That's my default face.
We weren't ever gonna
just have
impress
resting
her.
bitch face.
We were never gonna impress these two. Just face it, George.
Yeah,
Come on,
no,
man.
not at
you
all.
guys
I'm just
impress
here-
me. I don't have a podcast.
It's
You
not
can
bad.
have a podcast.
You can have this one.
I can also
Yeah.
Can I also plead the Dutch here? Because we aren't all that expressive.
That's okay.
We think you speak in hyperbole all the time.
We do.
I liked when Brett brought out the secret. The look on Rion's face was like, I just deciphered a 16th century text. I don't care about your children's.
It's from 1982. It's old. We've only been around a couple hundred years. Come on, we don't have Huguenots here. We don't have
The
Huguenots.
video was grainy. I could not even see what it was.
It's a likely excuse.
No, that's literally what happened. I couldn't read what it was. And then I had to think which the secret this was.
Right. It's not the.
Because there's two.
Yes.
And one is about manifesting things.
Yes.
I was
It's.
wondering how that related to any puzzles.
Believe me.
Well, we're trying to manifest the author of this book for you.
Yes. I.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much in a grave. And I think I know which church he is in.
Well, it's funny you say the other secret because I have tried to tell my friends about this secret thing that I'm into, the secret, and they're like, dude,
The
that
Rhonda Byrne book?
Manifest.
manifesting thing of like making things happen. What is up with you?
It's quite subtle witchcraft.
Well, and then they think I'm going to sell them something
Yeah,
like
that makes sense. It's girl boss.
like Amway,
It's a girl boss book.
right? Like Amway.
Yes.
No, I'm.
Lululemon leggings.
Yes, here you go. Because I'm totally into those. No, I'm totally good.
I don't know. I can't see the screen console. The
You can- yeah.
shoulders.
Let me show you. All normal up here, but all woman downstairs.
Party.
Just saying, guys.
In the back.
Party downstairs, guys. In the Lululemon.